So guys, what is going on? I hope you guys are well. So guys, you've probably seen Terence Crawford say that, Terence Crawford, I feel sorry for him because, he's always trying to say why, he's done this and done that. And listen, man, he's a good fighter. He's accomplished a lot in the sport of boxing and he deserves respect without question. I don't think he gets the credit, but he's basically saying that when you look at all the welterweights, Keith Thurman, Danny Garcia, Sean Porter, and he goes, all of those guys, Errol Spence, he goes, I've achieved more than all of those guys. I'm more accomplished than all of those guys. Look at what I've achieved and look at what they've done. I do agree, he's more accomplished. He's a 3-weight world champion. He undisputed 140-pound champion. I know people question his resume, but in terms of achievement, he's right. He's right. At 147, I disagree because I feel like he beat Jeff Horn, who was a champion, but Jeff Horn wasn't really regarded as a stellar champion. He beat Benavidez, Kavalauskas, and then Amir Khan and Kell Brook. You can say that Amir Khan and Kell Brook in their prime were very good welterweights, but they were way past their sell-by date when they fought Crawford, And Benavidez was never like, I know he's a decent fighter, but he looked injured to me. His leg, he was limping, and he's never been a world champion. He's never been, a top dog, So he's never been on top of the welterweight division, or he's never even been never been a world champion. So how credible was that win? So at 147, you have to question what Terence, that he's not more accomplished. And when you think about it, yes, he's more accomplished in terms of belts and what he's achieved. And he did say that Pacquiao's the only one that's achieved more, which is obviously he can't claim that he's achieved more than Pacquiao, and he did say that Pacquiao's the only one that's achieved more than him. But when you look at Danny Garcia's resume, that's a stellar resume, man. That's a stellar resume. For me, his resume is far better than Crawford's resume. Let's not forget, Danny Garcia beat a prime Lucas Matisse and a prime Amir Khan. Who has Terence Crawford got on his resume as good as a prime Lucas Matisse or a prime Amir Khan? Nobody. And yes, I do think Danny Garcia had a few lucky decisions like Herrera and Peterson. I thought he lost those fights, but when you look at those two wins alone, a prime Peterson and prime Matisse and a prime Khan, those two guys were hot properties. Khan was seen as the best at 140 pound. And that put Garcia on the map. So that was a brilliant win for Danny Garcia, right? That really put Danny Garcia on the map. I do feel that Danny Garcia has a good resume. Yeah, I know people try to take the mick out of Danny Garcia at 147. He's a gatekeeper. Garcia's at 140. Garcia was a very good fighter. Now at 147, you can question who did really Danny Garcia beat. But when you think at the 147-pound division, for me, Danny Garcia should have got the decision against Sean Porter. For me, the Garcia fight with Thurman was very close. Yeah, I thought Thurman nicked it, but it was close. You can't act like he got blown away. It was very close. The only fighter that's beaten Danny Garcia comprehensively is Errol Spence. Now, Errol Spence's resume, he's got a prime, when I say prime, a fresher Kell Brook, because Kell Brook was coming off an eye socket injury. He's got Mikey Garcia, which is a good name, but he wasn't really a 147-pound fighter. He's got Sean Porter, which is a very good win. And if he fights Ugas, so I would say at 147, I disagree. I think there's guys there that have got a better resume than Terence Crawford. And don't get me wrong, I think with Terence Crawford having the names like Amir Khan and Kell Brook on his resume, it looks good. But I just think that I think everybody knows that they were a shell of themselves when they fought Crawford. Crawford didn't fight the best version of those guys, So I think how much can you really take into it? I do rate Crawford. I think he's a good fighter, but I think at 147, and when you look at his resume compared to some of those guys, you have to say that, the other thing is Crawford did win quite comfortably those fights. It's not like he struggled in any of those fights. He won comprehensively. So you have to give him credit from that aspect. But I think Crawford. I think Crawford's a good fighter, man. Crawford's very, very skillful. He's a tactician, a masterful boxer. People question his resume all the time. You know, he's never going to be able to get credit from everybody. But I think if he keeps grinding away, eventually he will. So when you look at the other guy's resume, listen, don't get me wrong. I think Errol Spence has a better resume than Terence Crawford. He's got bigger names on there, especially at 147. But what you got to understand is Terence Crawford cleaned up at 140. He cleaned up. He won every single belt. Yeah, I know people will say, well, who did he beat? Yeah, listen. Someone was arguing with me the other day that I mentioned that I believe Amir Khan will beat everybody that Terence Crawford beat. And he said, oh, you say that because you're a Khan fan, this, that. No, I genuinely do believe that Khan would have beaten everybody that Terence Crawford beat. Like, I don't think there's anyone... Remember, Khan was a unified champion at 140. And when you look at who Crawford beat, Khan beat better guys at 140. Look at his resume compared to Crawford's resume. And I'm not saying Crawford wouldn't beat the guys that Khan beat. He would. But what I'm saying is if you look at Khan's resume... He's got a better resume than Crawford. That's just for me fact. Like I don't think how you can question a guy that's beaten Paulie Malignaggi, Zab Judah, Devin Alexander, Maidana, you know, Julio Diaz, you know, Katelnik, you know, he's beaten all these guys. I don't think how you can question. I think they're a lot better than like Ndongo and. You know, Postal was a decent win. Don't get me wrong. I don't rate Postal. But does anyone really think that Postal, especially the style that he got, would beat someone like Khan in his prime? I think Amir Khan's style is all wrong for someone like Postal. He would actually love to fight somebody like Postal, who likes to box, likes to keep it at range. Khan would love to fight someone like that. He would eat someone like that for breakfast. Not much power. You know, Khan loves to fight boxers like that. The ones that he doesn't like is the big punches. But what I was trying to point out is that I feel like Crawford, don't get me wrong, great fighter. I just think his resume, his resume at 147, listen, you can't blame him at 140 because, see, I criticize him and then I take it back. I tell you why. Because at 140, he beat everyone that was there that was a champion and he became undisputed. Now, it's not his fault how weak the division was or what the strength of the division was. You know what impressed me about Crawford at 140 is the way he beat those guys. So that's what's impressive about Crawford. I know people are saying, oh, look who he's beating and he's fought nobody, but look at the way he's beating them. I think that in itself is impressive. The way he's beating those guys, the way he beat Kell Brook, the way he beat Amir Khan, the way he beat Benavidez, the way he beat Kavalauskas, the way he beat Jeff Horn. The Jeff Horn victory was impressive because Manny Pacquiao had a tough fight with Jeff Horn and Crawford just washed him. So I think in that aspect, you have to give Terence Crawford credit. Now, has Terence Crawford got a marquee win on his resume? No. He may get that against Pacquiao, but even then people will criticize. The only way Terence Crawford gets any credit if he beats Errol Spence. If he beats Sean Porter, people will say, well, Sean Porter's lost anyway. You know, the only way Terence Crawford gets any credit if he beats, say, Errol Spence. Or he moves up to 154 and beats a Jamel Charlo. That's the only way he's going to get any kind of credit. Otherwise, Crawford's not going to get any credit. Do you think Crawford's going to get credit for beating, like, a Danny Garcia, who people say is a gatekeeper? No. So, Crawford is in a tricky spot. Even if Crawford fights Pacquiao, most people think Pacquiao's way, way past his best. So, he wouldn't even get credit for that. So, Crawford's in a sticky spot because Crawford, no matter where he goes, unless it's Errol Spence, he's probably not going to get the credit. Because people are going to say, well, Porter was already beat by Kell Brook. He was beat by Garcia. He was beat by Errol Spence. He was beat by Keith Thurman. And if he fights Keith Thurman, Keith Thurman was washed up. He was past his best. Manny Pacquiao, Manny was too old. He was way past his best. You see, he's never going to get credit for it. So it doesn't matter where Terence Crawford goes. It doesn't seem like he's going to get the full credit for his victory. And that's what frustrates him because that's why he probably thinks, why do I want to fight Sean Porter? Because I'm not going to get credit for fighting Sean Porter. I'm not going to get credit for the victory. So I can understand his frustration. You got to feel for Crawford. You know, I know his resume is not stellar, But when you look at it, it's not his fault as well. He's fighting what he can get, really. You know, it's not his fault. He wants the Errol Spence fight, but it's not happening. It's not even really being talked about. So if he can get the Pacquiao fight, that would be great. Now, I don't know what's going on with the Pacquiao situation. The Pacquiao-Crawford situation is becoming like a bit like the Fury-Joshua situation, where you're like, what is going on? Are these fights going to get announced? I do have my doubts about Pacquiao-Crawford. I know a lot of people think that it's going to get made. I do have my doubts because this fight is a fight that has let us down so many times in the past. I don't know what's going to change now that makes us think that the fight's going to happen. I hope it does happen. As a boxing fan, I would love to see Pacquiao v Crawford, but I'm not holding my breath at all because I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Let's see what happens with Crawford's next opponent. If it's not Pacquiao, does he fight Sean Porter? Can they lure Danny Garcia for another world title shot? I don't know. I don't think Danny Garcia would fight Terence Crawford because I think it's too risky a fight coming off a loss against Errol Spence, especially in a one-sided fight. I think they'd want to have another fight before they take a tough fight like that. So I don't know. I don't know what Terence Crawford's next move is going to be, but I think it has to be a big fight. I just don't think Terence Crawford can afford another fight where people are saying this is ridiculous, you know. You know, like, for example, there was talks about Josecito Lopez. That wouldn't have gone down with the fans at all. That wouldn't have gone well with the fans at all. So it's going to be intriguing to see, man. It's going to be intriguing to see what he does, man. What Terence Crawford does, what Pacquiao does. Hopefully they can get it on. Hopefully they can fight one another. But again, like I said, don't hold your breath because we don't know. We don't know. We hope it happens, but we don't know if it's going to happen. But in terms of Crawford saying that, you know, his resume or what he's done, he's a more accomplished fighter than any of those guys. Yeah, in terms of achievements and titles, yes, I agree. But in terms of resume, no. There are welterweights with a better resume than him. Now, some people make out Beltran and Ricky Burns and all those guys were good. Yeah, they were good. They were good. Gamboa was a good fighter. So those were good, but they were at the lower weight classes. And I don't look at those guys as like some of the names that I mentioned, you know. Beltran, Ricky Burns, Gamboa was a very good fighter. Gamboa was especially in his prime when he fought Crawford. A lot of people thought Gamboa would beat Crawford. So that was a very good win. To me, I still look at that fight as his best win. Because at that time, Gamboa was a force. Do you understand? I know sometimes people forget what somebody was. They think about what Gamboa is now. And you see him losing to like Haney and Davis. And you think, oh, this guy's... But... the version that fought the Gamboa that fought Crawford was a different animal altogether. So, again, I think that was a good win. Him going over to England and beating Ricky Burns for his first world title, that was an impressive win. You've got to give Crawford credit for that. But he hasn't got the defining names. He hasn't got the marquee names that he's looking for on his resume. He hasn't got the top names. You know, and I think that's what he's looking for. He's looking for the top names. So let's see, man. Let's see what happens with Terence Crawford. I wish him all the best. I hope Terence Crawford can get a Pacquiao fight. Just because from a selfish point of view, that's a fight that I want to see. I want to see Manny Pacquiao v Terence Crawford. I think it's a great fight. It's an opportunity for Manny Pacquiao to add further to his stellar legacy. And it's an opportunity for Terence Crawford to stamp his claim as the best welterweight in the world. Because I do think then... I don't think any of them can talk about resume because I think Terence Crawford would have a better win than any of the welterweights on his resume because Pacquiao would be the best win. You know, Spence hasn't beaten anyone as good as Pacquiao, neither has Porter, none of them guys. So that argument about him having a top welterweight completely diminishes because Pacquiao is ranked number 3 in the welterweight division. So he's ranked ahead of all the other guys, right? So let's see if this fight can be made. I hope so. I'm not so sure it will, but let's hope it gets made. Leave your thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. And guys, remember to please like, share, subscribe to my channel. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.